The Common Groundwater podcast is brought to you by CalSec, an international company headquartered in Kalamazoo that provides expertly crafted ingredients that help food and beverages look better, taste better, and last longer, all naturally. CalSec has set aggressive goals to send zero waste to landfills by 2030 and to create net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. You can learn more at calsec.com.
Hey folks, you are tuning in to Common Groundwater, a podcast by the Michigan Environmental Council, where we talk about issues of the environment that are felt widely and deeply across the state. We tell stories around them, and in the case of today's episode, we talk about solutions, or maybe lack thereof, to them. Joining me today is Emily Smith, a familiar face in the podcast. Emily, you work in land and conservation and water management and protection here at the Environmental Council. Great to have you back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, thank you. I wish we had better circumstances today to go over some things, but you joined us a few months ago. We were actually very excited at the time because legislation had just been introduced to help better protect dunes while also still making sure that dune-side communities were preserving their integrity and their image in many ways, and today we'll be kind of doing an update on that.
Yeah.
Before we begin, as we start all podcast episodes, we got to have a fun related question to the topic at hand. Mine for you was about the lakes of Michigan and beaches. I feel like Michiganders always have one lake that they'll strongly defend. Do you have a lake and a beach that you're all ramped up or amped up about?
I gave it lots of thought.
Okay.
And honestly, it's impossible.
Yeah, right?
I would have to preface that I've only been to 3 of the 5 Great Lakes. I haven't been to Erie or Ontario. And maybe also, I've never been to a bad beach on Lake Michigan.
Yeah,
So maybe that's what I'll go with.
Honestly, that's a great argument in defense of Lake Michigan itself. There's no bad beaches on there. Yeah, I'd have to, that is true. I've never come across a bad beach on that lake. I think I might have mentioned this in a past podcast, but I grew up near Lake Huron. I went to it a lot, so I always feel the need to defend it. My favorite beach, though, might get me fired from the Environmental Council because it's actually in Canada.
Oh!
My family used to vacation over there every year. We just, go 30 minutes to the Blue Water Bridge and then drive a little bit farther to the beach. And on that side of Lake Huron, it's all sandy. So it's a really nice beach, lots of nostalgia.
Yeah, your quintessential beach.
Yes. My backup beach might be somewhere up in the Thumb, though, because we'd also sometimes take a day trip up to the Thumb and go on a beach there. So
yeah, I took lots of family vacations on Lake Huron as well. We have a family cabin in Black River. So.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And that's northern Michigan on the east side? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it was just south of Alpena.
Oh, very cool. Okay,
Yeah.
So we have at least a Lake Huron supporter next to me.
Yes.
Very nice. I can't deny, though, that Lake Michigan really is great for vacationing. So, to get more serious, as I kind of mentioned at the top of this episode, when we last spoke a few months ago, we had some really great legislation introduced as a way to help protect Michigan's dunes. They're globally unique, very beloved. Could you give us a bit of just a quick recap of sorts as to what this legislation was and why we were so excited about it?
Yeah. We had introduced House Bill 6165, so that's 6165 of 2024, to protect critical dunes. So that bill would have restored some of the lost protections that were gutted back in 2012, would have implemented some common sense construction guidelines, would have had better guidance to protect homes on the lake shores, and also to protect our globally unique and rare dunes themselves. We also had mining legislation in the works to better define what mining is, to protect the dunes from dangerous destruction and mining operations of sand mining in the areas.
Gotcha. And the thought being with both of those pieces is if development gets too rampant or too destructive, that's obviously really bad for dunes, which are fragile and need to move, things of that nature.
Yeah, they are ever changing. And so just to have basic guidelines there and how to develop in the area, but also where not to develop in the area.
Yes, yeah, because we've seen those pictures and stories of, as we talked about, I think in our last episode, of homes getting swept up by dunes or by waves if there's erosion.
A whole town.
Yeah, a whole town. Yeah. Well, again, it's been a few months since we last spoke about this legislation. We were really excited at the time. Could you give us an update as to where things are now in early 2025 with that progress?
Yeah, so we had a very lackluster lame duck last session.
Yeah.
Not much moved through the legislature on anything. So elections came and went. We now have an entirely new structure for the House. We no longer have the trifecta that we had last session. And so now we're just needing to reach across the aisle a little bit more to get things introduced and get things done.
Yeah, I feel like that has been the common refrain as we've done these sorts of Where Are We Now episodes on the podcast. We had great legislation introduced that the public, I would say, would largely love. People love dunes in this case. And we had legislators who are all for getting that legislation through, but politicking ultimately took precedence these past few months, which I think is a shame. I was thinking before this podcast was filmed, I was thinking about how, dunes are in largely conservative-leaning areas of the state of Michigan, up and down the West Coast and in the UP. And then people from all over, including liberal-leaning areas, are going to these places. So really, even from a political level, you would think there'd be a lot of love for them.
And also, on the politicking front, I guess, one of our bill sponsors is no longer in the legislature, and part of our hurdle then is to look for new sponsors for the bills.
Yeah, okay. So that maybe sets us up really well for the next question I had, which is, where do we go from here? It sounds like there's still some hope then that we can get similar legislation introduced despite the House and the Senate of Michigan being split by party.
Yeah, we really have to focus on shared values. As you said, there's a lot of love for the dunes and the coastal communities that they affect and that they're in. Not just for the legislators or the communities on the lakeshore. There's lots of fun stories from many legislators or people from all across the state. They go and travel there. They've got stories like we shared of how we visit. And so just educating on our globally rare and unique critical dune areas, I think, will help build momentum in getting different sponsors and getting the legislation introduced.
Yeah, I like that. A great way to think going ahead. And correct me if I'm wrong too, this is just coming from the communications person, but I feel like in these past few months or so that land protection really has taken a forefront, whether that's from a very concerned, legitimate standpoint, or maybe one that's sometimes a little bit more misinformed. But if you think about mining issues, we had a big mining project that was right along Lake Superior get shot down. We've had just recently lots of concerns around solar development and where that's placed on land. So anyway, I only mention that to say that it seems like people have land protection at the forefront of their minds collectively here, and hopefully that bodes well for mining.
Yeah.
Or not for mining, I'm sorry, for dunes. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Of course, Emily, you work on more than just dunes legislation. You're working on other issues of water and of land. Are there any other priorities that you or that other folks in the movement are particularly excited about for this next year or two? Yeah,
I think personally, some projects that I'm working on right now, of course it can change as the legislature ramps up and issues that it looks like that they want to focus on. But for now, we are focusing on pollinator habitats and protections for pollinators, which includes regulation of certain pesticides that are really harmful, not just to these pollinators, but also to humans. We're finding that they're in our water supply, that they're in our bloodstreams, and it's just not a very healthy environment or anything of the sort. So we're focusing on that, on pollinators, and also protecting fragile ecosystems. So one project is to protect the Jordan River Valley from ORV use in certain areas.
That's off-road vehicles? Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Very interesting. I didn't know about that. That's a new one for me, even as a staff member with you. Very cool.
Yeah.
So a little bit of like the sort of statewide settings, but then also like getting into some more localized areas, whether it be dunes or with the Jordan Valley.
Yeah.
I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, with that, Emily, anything else that you want to share for the better of the podcast?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
just
great.
a little update and things that we're looking ahead.
Yeah, well, I appreciate not only you taking your time, but also giving us an update. One that obviously stinks to have to share. And I think stinks is like a euphemistic word. I think we were very, very thoroughly upset about how the past late 2024 went. But I am glad that we have a new game plan in place, and not just us, but other folks fighting for the cause too. So
yeah, we definitely had to regroup.
Yeah.
So.
Well, with that, thanks again. Thank you to our sponsor, Kelsec, for sponsoring us this past year. Kelsec is a spice company based in Kalamazoo that is grounded in sustainability principles through its B Corporation status. So lots of love to them. And then finally, thank you to the audience members for sticking with us, not only through the Dune series, but other topics that we've covered over this past year or so. I'm really excited to be able to share some new updates to the podcast, starting with our next episode. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.